Hello and welcome to Bud Explains, where I take a subject, be that rules, history or concept from the role-playing world, and try to explain it to you in a way that I hope helps you understand how it works. Today's explanation is Pisces and Delta Green, Part 1. Please note that this is generally considered handler-only information, so watch at your own risk. Also, it is worth mentioning that what I talk about here is Pisces pre-Delta Green role-playing game. What has happened since then will be covered in a further video. In order to understand the origin of Pisces, we first need to understand the insects from Shagai, otherwise known as the Shan. In the year 1643, the Severn Valley was settled by a group of refugees in a forested area called Goatswood, only these were not normal refugees. They were creatures fleeing the destruction of their homeworld, Shagai, a planet wiped out by the harbinger and maker, Groth, a planet-sized monster that prowls the darkness of space, and by coming to Earth, the Shan had marooned themselves. Shagai, a planet in the Andromeda system, had a strange orbital pattern, meaning temperatures rose and fell dramatically. It had a thick acidic atmosphere and was cloaked in darkness with little sunlight reaching the surface. The oceans were oily black and were not water but a thick organic compound, covering almost a third of the surface, and the shore was encrusted with rope-like urchins, with life having a jarring but ever-renewing cycle. From this brutal environment, an aggressive species with the ability to utilise electromagnetic radiation to survive began rapidly evolving, the Shan. And no longer restricted by the depths of the oily organic oceans, they were able to reach the surface and thrived on the radiation present, using essentially the equivalent of photosynthesis. An extremely long-lived species, the average Shan can live between 1500 to 1800 years, though breeding is fatal to them, with their brood consuming their parents as their first meal before turning on each other until only the strongest survives. They eventually emerged onto land and were driven to explore beyond Shagai, becoming adept at smelting and tool-making. They erected structures and developed methods of resisting the extreme conditions on their planet, eventually conquering their environment. As they explored, they discovered that other civilizations, long extinct, had erected cities of pyramidesque green minerals unknown to the planet that offered shelter from the harsh conditions. It was within one of these ancient edifices that they came into contact with a force that would define them, the demon sultan, Azathoth. A portal discovered in one of the structures led to the court of the blind idiot god, and they found themselves vulnerable to Azathoth's immense influence, becoming touched by its cosmic power and its first priests. Known as Zardahugla, the cradle of chaos to the Shan, they believed Azathoth to be the avatar of shapeless, mindless power. Azathoth's influence changed the Shan in some significant ways. Their understanding of physical sciences saw a giant leap forward, as well as that of travelling in higher dimensions becoming known to them, and they began to understand the ancient knowledge discovered in the pyramid structures. They also developed the social hierarchy, and their priest-scientists were revered amongst their kind and also avoided. The Shan both adored and feared Azathoth. Additionally, the Shan were changed at a more fundamental subatomic level. Their exposure to the gates connecting Shagai to Azathoth allowed them to develop the ability to manipulate their own atoms, making them able to slide through the electrons of organic substances and synchronizing their structure to let them use living things as hosts. They also developed telepathy that allowed them to control using mental commands, but only through physical contact. They could essentially phase into another creature, find the central nervous system, then plug themselves into that creature's consciousness and control it telepathically. Ultimately, they discovered non-Euclidean space travel, and it came to the realization that the temples of Azathoth were in fact spacecraft. They visited the world Xyclotl and enslaved the creatures there, beginning their interstellar empire. They sent scouts to scour the universe to search for powerful artifacts, terrible knowledge, and other species to enslave. Their sick-low brains began yearning after things to distract them, and as their mental prowess grew, so did their desire to be entertained. They found the emotions of telepathically dominated creatures to be thrilling, and would often torture or torment them in order to feel the rush of sensation. As they grew bored with the species, they would look out for others to serve as playthings, and even changed their reproductive cycle so that slave races carried the egg sacs of their brood and the ultimate fate of being devoured. As their power reached its pinnacle, they were dealt a terrible blow. In 592 AD, Shagai was obliterated by the Great Old One Groth. Billions perished as Shagai boiled with radiation, though those that worshipped Azathoth escaped through non-Euclidean space. They congregated at Azathoth, deciding that this would be their new base of power, though the backbone of authority had been broken. Due to the Azathoth slaves having a local religion whereby they sacrificed themselves to a carnivorous plant that sat in the middle of a meteoric crater, some Shan considered it a threat, arguing for it to be destroyed. However, this action would have enraged the Azathoth slaves, so while the majority of them refused to act, some chose to leave this world for a less contaminated environment. These Shan visited a world in our system called Thugon, which on first look seemed to be uninhabited. That was until the inhabitants made themselves known and started killing their slaves and eating the Shan. This caused them to quickly leave this place. Eventually, that colony of Shan arrived in our solar system on the planet Uranus, one inhabited by metallic cuboids known as the Ligurics, who lived near the core of the planet. As they were immune to the Shan's powers, they decided that instead of enslaving them, they would build a new temple ship, as the one from Shagai was starting to show strain after the amount of travel it had done. The beings of Ligurics found the sadistic behaviour of the Shan to be disturbing and did not want their planet to suffer the same fate as a former planet in our system called Thioth that had been reduced to rubble when Azathoth had once manifested there. Relations, after 850 years, collapsed between the two parties, and the Shan elders felt that they were losing control of those that had been born here as they were turning away from the worship of the demon sultan and instead to that of Larog, the god of the beings of Ligurics, seeing themselves as having no connection to Shagai. The elder Shan turned to a group of the beings of Ligurics who had turned to the worship of Azathoth to perform an insurrection, which failed and led to those Azathoth worshippers being executed and the Shan given an ultimatum: leave or die. A measly 28 Shan left the planet and arrived on Earth in 1643 AD. The temple ship materialised improperly half underground, and the Shan determined that the sunlight here harmed them, acting like a poison to their biology. A few minutes was okay, but around an hour in the sunshine would lead to death, and as such they tended to move about at night. They had discovered that their temple ship could not teleport off Earth due to our electromagnetic field preventing it from re-entering non-Euclidean space. It seemed that they were doomed. There was, however, a glimmer of hope for the Shan. Their arrival had been witnessed by a group of Protestants who had fled into Ghostwood Forest in order to avoid being executed by Catholic royalists. Upon finding the clearing where it arrived, the Shan leapt upon them and cerebrally infested them. These hairless apes of Earth had no defence against their phasing ability. The Shan read their thoughts and trawled through their memories, making these unfortunates the first cultists of the blind idiot god in the Ghostwood Forest. The Shan had originally planned to convert the locals to the worship of Azathoth and spread across Britain and then the world, ultimately building a trans-dimensional gate to manifest Azathoth fully, allowing it to lay waste to this solar system and wipe out the Ligurixians and the rebellious Shan. They did not, however, account for the religious war between the Protestant parliamentarians and the royalist Catholics. The parliamentarians were victorious in 1650 and law and order began returning to the Isle. 1652 passed and the cult survived, with those that lived in the Severn Valley area living in fear of the mysterious goings-on in Ghostwood Forest. Those people that worked the forest, such as hunters and woodsmen, vanished. Strange lights and noises could be heard on solstice nights, and eventually the town of Campside asked Parliament for help. To it they sent the famous witch hunter Matthew Hopkins and his men. They tried and hanged over 40 people, and the full 13-member coven was wiped out, with 2 Shans being killed. With their tail between their legs, they retreated back to their temple ship and didn't leave for over a century. They next explored the outside world in 1768, when a young Italian composer, Benevento Chieta Bordighera, spent a night in Ghostwood Forest in order to prove his bravery. He encountered the Shan and became infested by them and sent back to human society to determine their state of social and technological advancement. Finding that though their technology had only slowly advanced, that their organisational abilities had improved significantly. They formulated an idea and had Bordighera compose an opera called Massa de Requiem de Shagai that had a spell woven into it that would summon Azathoth to Earth in order to destroy it and free their temple ship. The first performance in Rome in 1769 caused a riot, and the third act was interrupted, causing Pope Clement XIII to have all copies destroyed and Bordighera imprisoned for heresy in 1770, and subsequently executed the following year. The Shan residing inside him left his body and made their way back to Goatswood. In 1928, the Shan emerged again when an artist, Basil Ives, returned from Kingsport, Massachusetts to Campside, and while visiting the Ghostwood Forest he became a host and travelled back to America. He was driven to commit terrible murders before being discovered by a group of vigilantes and killed. The Shan again escaped and eventually made its way back with intelligence on how much human civilization had advanced in the meantime. Then, in 1964, a British author, Ronald Shea, stumbled upon the Shan's temple ship and became a host, though took his own life rather than be a slave to them. In that short time that they were in his mind, they discovered that humanity had achieved spaceflight. The Shan elders decided that it would not be advanced enough for them until the 21st century, so they sat back and waited. In 1968, the Paranormal Intelligence Section for Counterintelligence, Espionage and Sabotage, otherwise known as Pisces, assaulted the Goatswood stronghold with not only agents but hundreds of Gurkha soldiers. 2 agents accidentally found the temple ship and were captured by the Azathoth slaves, and their minds infested. The secrets laid bare to the Shan. Realising that these men would be missed, they set them free with a Shan in their heads, and these agents caused the raid to miss the temple ship. However, they effectively became a kind of patient zero for the infestation that spread through the organisation, with the Shan jumping from agent to agent, learning their deepest secrets. As of the late 1990s, the will of the Shan has fully infiltrated Pisces, as well as key positions in the Ministry of Defence, MI5, MI6, and the special branch of New Scotland Yard. They briefly controlled members of both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. However, they decided that they were too high profile, so exerted their influence over their permanent secretaries instead. Using this influence, they watch for investigators of the unnatural. They have also infiltrated the European Space Administration and plan on using it to free their temple ship from the bonds of Earth. They have also dug their way into the British space programme and the Prime Minister's advisor on scientific affairs, as well as a number of staff from a leading aerospace firm, Seven Aerospace, using this influence to improve Britain's space programme and making them more important. The Shan have devised a method of using humans to host Shan egg sacs, who consume their hosts upon hatching, and they are then placed in tanks of fluid that mimic the chemical composition of Shagai's biomass seas. There they mature quickly by using a hybrid of Shan-human technology, lowering this time to around 14 to 15 years. After this time, they enter Shan society. The host human incubators are kept in an underground facility at Seven Aerospace. The 26 elder Shan who originally arrived as refugees see themselves as superior to those earthborn Shan and hold all of the highest positions, with the younger Shan being left to do the menial tasks, usually covertly occupying humans, and as such they've become more used to the human world and the pleasures that can be derived from it. Their current goal is to conquer the earth and build gates to Azathoth. However, the happenings of 1652 changed their minds as they realised that there were not enough Shan to complete this task while also remaining hidden from humankind. Their current plan is to build a cut-down version of the temple ship and escape Earth. However, the current members of Shan on Earth will not all fit in, and open talk of sacrificing them to Azathoth would cause revolt amongst the youngest of their kind. Also, some of the elder Shan want to abandon their young on Earth and return to Xyzlotl. Similarly, the younger Shan have been plotting to establish an empire on Earth, dominating humanity as they consider Earth to be their home, and ultimately they far outlive humanity, so who could stop them? Okay, that concludes part 1 of this series. The next part will go into the formulation, Pisces. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and share it, and make sure to subscribe for more Bud Explains videos in the future. Bud out.